Presenting today's webinar, Demystifying the New Era of Tech and What It Means for the Finance Team, I'm Nick Ezzo, Vice President of Marketing, and Elaine Nawak, Director of Product Marketing of Auditoria.AI. So without further ado, I am pleased to turn the program over to our first presenter. Take it away, Elaine.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So happy to be here today. So today we're going to be covering a little bit of information about the evolution of tech in finance. So where did it begin and what does it look like and where is it going? And then we're going to get into the specifics around some of the technology, OCR versus computer vision. Then we'll talk a little bit about RPA and smart bots, and then a little bit about natural language processing. And then finally, how to get started with automation in the finance back office. So I think if you're currently evaluating software, you're looking at solutions that might help you solve some of your back office challenges, then most likely you've heard words such as machine learning or robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, all these kind of phrases bandied about. But really, how does this tech jargon translate into how it helps you do your job better? So what are the benefits to automating processes? And to better understand the impact that technology could have, what Nick and I are going to do today is pull back the covers to show how the latest technology works, what it's capable of achieving, and most importantly, how it will change the way finance functions are performed.
Great, I'll jump in there, Elaine. So, you're probably asking, if you're on this webinar, why should you care about all the buzzwords, what all the buzzwords mean and what they represent? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, we want to understand what the tech does and how it's going to impact your organization. Secondly, we want to see why the tech works and how it will change the way you operate your processes. We're going to intelligently compare across different vendor offerings to hone in on what's really best for your team. We're going to gain knowledge around levels of technology to fit your needs for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want to overbuy technology, and you certainly don't want to underbuy it. You want to make sure that you're getting the right sized technology solution for your business needs. And then finally, we hope to help you make smart decisions about what technology will work for you in your company. So let's talk about the industrial revolutions, Elaine.
Yeah, and I love this this slide where we kind of talk about, to understand where we are in the age of tech. What we need to do is kind of look back a little bit to where we've been and how we actually got here. So if I go way back over the last few centuries, there's been these huge leaps in technology that are called industrial revolutions, and they've drastically impacted life and work here on Earth. So in the late 1700s, that marked the first industrial revolution. That's when an invention propelled operations to a new level in the world. So since then, we've seen quite a few of these milestone changes. And the onset of each one of these revolutions was sparked by a fundamental change to the way business was accomplished. And each invention along this timeline represents a point in time when productivity really literally hit a ceiling. And then something was unlocked that helped to usher in a whole new era of unprecedented growth. And that really catapulted progress to the next level, and it kickstarted a phase of galvanized expansion. So right now, if you look here on the slide, we are on the cusp of the fifth industrial revolution, and that involves the massive adoption of artificial intelligence and cognitive systems to accelerate and transform the way work gets done. So if you think of digital assistants, if you think of your phone and your Siri and your Alexa and how they answer questions, if you think about the face recognition assistants that actually unlocks your iPhone, or you think about your Nest thermostat, right, that moderates your home temperatures, all these are AI and cognitive-driven tech that make life more convenient. And this tech is rapidly gaining adoption in the corporate back office. So what we think is it's right now is the time to embrace this technology, and the greatest place of need that we've identified, it's in the business world and it's in the finance back office. And most importantly, in the workplace of the chief financial officer.
Let's dig into some.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more how it affects finance?
Sounds good. So what are the tech trends that we're seeing in the finance back office? There's some technology that's been around for a few years, so like RPA, robotic process automation, or OCR, optical character recognition, but we're seeing a rise of new technologies such as cobots, or if you don't know that term, I certainly didn't not until long ago. Cobots are collaborative robots that work between systems of record and other applications to seamlessly integrate data across your platforms and functions. So these robots, these advanced technologies, and other advanced technologies like machine learning and computer vision and natural language processing that we'll talk about today are really going to help you to do a number of things. One is you're going to make better decisions, improve the quality of internal and external customer interactions, achieve a significant savings of both time and money, build the digital capabilities around your internal processes, and then take advantage of these new technologies to reduce costs and optimize performance. Why? Because you want to gain a competitive advantage and not fall behind. So according to McKinsey & Company, a recent study, by the year 2030, which is only 9 years away, by the way, the enterprise will be fully automated, and the race to get there is already underway. So the augmentation of humans with technology will unlock that exponential growth and efficiency that Elaine talked about on the previous slide with the industrial revolutions. So without further ado, let's go back through time, if you will. So once upon a time, there were manual operations, and there still are. Once upon a time, the finance of the back office was paper-based. Spreadsheets were literally sheets of paper. Closing the books was actually done in a physical book. Sometime around 40 or 50 years ago, with mini computers, mainframes, microcomputers, and so on, electronic spreadsheets like Excel and VisiCalc and Lotus 123 came along. But even though those technologies were great, there was still a lot of manual processes. Fast forward about a decade ago, the advent of something called robotic process automation or business process automation came along. And these were really good technologies that solved a real problem at that time, particularly if the processes were extremely well defined, if they worked within the parameters of the company and on structured data where you had rows and columns, like spreadsheets and things where it was structured data. However, in the last 10 years, we've seen the introduction of what I'm calling AI cognitive solutions. And these solutions really harness things like adaptive context-based data. They can look at structured and unstructured data, not just in rows and columns, but an invoice might come in that looks different than any other invoice, and these AI cognitive systems can recognize those. These new systems are also harnessing AI-based machine learning, natural language processing, and natural language understanding. If you don't understand what those mean, don't worry about it. In a few slides, we're going to tell you everything you needed to know, but we're afraid to ask about what those things mean. These new solutions also harness advanced optical character recognition, and then the next generation of that, which is called computer vision, which we'll drill down into. And then lastly, AI-powered smart bots and cognitive automation. So this next wave of automation and intelligent technologies really further elevates the experience, impact, and value for your organization, establishing a greater degree of trust over time. So let's take a little deeper dive into some of the technology.
But first, a poll question. Yes, let's put a poll question up there, Patricia. So we'd like to understand you, our audience, what your involvement is in terms of understanding technology. So if you could answer the question, I have a familiarity with the following levels of technology. So is it whatever comes with my ERP system? Is it some basic OCR, or maybe you might know some robotic process automation? Maybe you are a little bit more tech savvy and you know about machine learning and artificial intelligence. Or maybe you're already at the Industrial Revolution, the fifth one that's coming with the next gen AI and cognitive systems. Or it's okay, you can admit that you're not really that familiar with technology at all, and that's okay too. We just kind of want to get a pulse on the audience and see where you are in terms of understanding and having a familiarity with technology in general. So we'll let that poll go on for just a little bit more. And then I think we'll have Nick drill into the specifics around OCR versus computer vision and what that looks like. In the meantime, and I think until the poll question is finished, I don't think that the slide deck gets shared. So we'll just take another few seconds for that to start tabulating the results. And maybe we'll take a look at what comes out as a result.
Yeah, it should be very interesting.
Yes, I'd like to see how savvy our audience is when it's all said and done. So, okay. So we have a pretty good savvy. I love the fact that people did say, okay, maybe they're not that familiar, and that's okay too. But the majority said basic OCR and robotic process automation. About 40% of the audience said that they're familiar with that. So good on you. And then about 10% AI and cognitive systems. So very well. Any thoughts on this one, Nick?
Well, yeah, I think it's pretty interesting that people have at least dipped a toe in the water with basic OCR and RPA, which is great. And then another cohort are using some machine learning and AI. But I think there's a lot of opportunities out there for next-gen AI and cognitive systems. So very interesting poll. Thanks, everybody, for participating.
Yeah, and our goal here today is to sort of get you a little bit more familiar with this kind of tech so that you're not afraid to listen or hear or learn about it, and then maybe start doing a little more research into ways that can automate your back office functions and really help you and your teams just be more optimized and quicker and faster, more efficient, and all those great things that can be presented as a result. Okay, so Nick, yeah, I got to go back and share your screen again, I believe.
Okay, I'm gonna pause that, and I'm gonna share my screen if I can. Okay, and going back to, okay, can you see my screen, Elaine?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
So just go next slide.
Cool, awesome. So now let's drill down into some of the technology we're going to be talking about today. So optical character recognition, what is it? It's really the use of technology to read characters in a structured format, translate that into code, and then use the structured inputs to create this characters on a page. So OCR has been around for decades, actually, and we've all used it. If you've ever taken a PDF using Adobe Acrobat and converted it to a document like a Word document, you'll know that it's okay, but it's not perfect because it's character-based. The system doesn't realize that these are actually sentences that are strung together. It doesn't realize that there's a context or an intent to that sentence, and you end up with some really crazy things when you try to use optical character recognition. It's okay, works great for things like scanning checks for your bank, but really, because it lacks that the true understanding, we use computer vision today to take that to the next level. So computer vision, what it attempts to do is replicate human vision, collecting information from words, images, and videos. If you have a smartphone, which all of us do nowadays, like I have an iPhone, you may have an Android or other phone. If you were to open up your photo application, either Google Photos, Apple Photos, whatever, type in your search box and type in the word Halloween or graduation, you'd be surprised that it actually understands. It'll show you pictures of last Halloween or pictures of a graduation, people with caps and gowns on. How does it know that? Well, computer vision understands the context. It understands what a cap and gown means. It means graduation. A Christmas tree or menorah means the holiday season. So computer vision really takes it to that next level, and not just replacing what a human does, but really augmenting what human beings do. So, computer vision tries to replicate that human vision, collecting the information from those images and videos, defining those attributes, and in acquiring and analyzing those images, it gains a better understanding. And really, the reason why this is all possible today is really due to the internet. Your Adobe Acrobat for OCR is operating on your own computer and your own data. However, the network effect, using things that are attached to the internet, means that millions of people, maybe hundreds of millions of people, are all contributing to this data set that makes the computer vision algorithm smarter and smarter, and it continues to learn. And as we go through this presentation, one of the hallmarks of these technologies is they are self-learning, and they will continue to improve and get better the more data that they are input. So back to you, Elaine. Let's talk about some of these techniques.
Yeah, so we heard about what it does. So I'm just going to go a little bit more in depth, get a little more tech geek on you, and talk about the details and how it works. So there are a few different types of techniques that the computer vision technology employs in order to scan and capture and analyze the data, as Nick told us. First, there's an image classification. So this involves a group of images that are organized into a set of predefined classes that uses a collection of sample images. So again, alluding to this huge library that Nick referred to, right? And those images are already classified. So this image classification process then completes the image as a whole and assigns a specific label to it instead of using complex categorizations that I'm also going to talk about now. Something like image segmentation, that divides an image into sub-objects or sub-parts in order for it to detect these different objects, separate from the background, or maybe separate from another object in that same image. And this is represented through a pixel mask, and that's where it sort of does this kind of extraction. And then a segment of that image represents that specific class of object, such as a Halloween pumpkin, for example. And then the neural network has identified that as being an image, and it matches what it sees in your image with what's in this huge contextual library. Then there's also like object detection. So this refers to the application of the computer vision for detecting objects in a natural environment and then localizing them through the bounding boxes. And that helps with the visual data, right? So if you think of an image or a video, this object detection searches for these class-specific details, and it does things like, what are the number of objects that can be detected in the image? And then it kind of looks at all these different images. Now, the drawback is that this is a very time-consuming approach for computer vision, and a lot of times it can be inaccurate. So it really is often combined, this technique, with lots of these other techniques like the object classification or the object recognition, and that's how it achieves better results. So it's not any one technique, it usually uses all these different techniques to try to get the most accurate result. Then we also have face and person recognition. That sounds pretty self-explanatory. It really is just a subpart of the object detection that's very specific for the human face, right? So you can imagine facial recognition is going to perform detection and recognition based on features. So it's going to look for things like the mouth, the eyes, the nose, and then it's going to classify those things using these features and positioning. Then we also have something called edge detection. Again, sort of common sense, but you can imagine it detects the boundaries that an object is within, right? So it uses mathematical methods, and that aids in detecting the sharp changes or like changes in the image's brightness. So something's darker and then it's something lighter right next to it. It considers that a sharp edge. It can see that as the boundary of that object, right? And it's mainly done through these traditional image processing based algorithms and all these convolutions. And then it's specifically designed around this edge detection filter. And these are often used as pre-processing steps for all these other detection tasks that I'm talking about today. Now, there's just a couple more. There's image restoration. When we think about that, you can think of it like something old and faded, maybe from your grandma's attic, right? And these are old image hard copies that have been poorly stored, maybe not captured well, and there's a loss of image quality. So there's additional like sort of noise that is now reduced through mathematical tools, and it often requires further analysis, but it uses it to sort of bring that image back to get a more like a better result in understanding what that image looks like. There's also feature matching, and this is outside of the facial recognition, but this is where it looks at images and sort of regions within that image to get the most data about that specific object. So it looks for like strong indicators of the object's details, and it's very much more localized, and it might look for the sharp details such as corners or other parts of that object to be able to serve as these edges. And then it relates those to other images that have similar calibration and object identification. So these are all very critical to the computer vision. If you think about things like camera calibration, when it puts things in focus and that kind of thing, or there's object identification where the application of the feature matching, that's where it's most commonly found. And then there's three main areas. There's detection, there's the formation of local descriptors, and there's matching. And then all those together work to give you this feature matching. And then the other two quick areas that computer vision does is scene reconstruction. That's really what it kind of does, a digital 3D reconstruction of an object from a photograph. This is the most complex of the scenarios and techniques for computer vision. It has to do with a point cloud, and it has to do with like taking all the points on that object's surface, and again, using algorithms, some more advanced technology to be able to reconstruct a mesh of that photograph subject. And then lastly, there's the vision motion analysis, and that's machine learning that refers to the study of moving objects or animals. And it takes into account the trajectory of these bodies in motion as it does the analysis. And it combines, subtasks such as object detection and tracking and segmentation and pose estimation. So there you go. Lots of things that the computer vision does in terms of techniques to try to understand what an object is within either a video or an image.
That's super fascinating. I've learned a lot what you just talked about, Elaine. But why don't we break it down and can you let us know how this will really help the Office of Finance?
Yeah, so it's all fancy to talk about these terms and all these different techniques, right? But what can it do to elevate the functions of the finance back office? So I think indisputably OCR is definitely a technique that's still employed, and usually computer vision is wrapped around the OCR as well. And we know that OCR has really helped the back office and enterprises save time because it scans, it does a great job processing and scanning and editing documents that are all like sort of form-based and very structured. The information that's extracted, if it's a printed contract, maybe it's an image that needed to be retyped, instead of having to retype a form, you can just scan it and then it can actually do that OCR process. But I think when it comes to finance back office, there's really like a ton of tasks and processes, things in accounts payable and sort of actions in accounts receivable that are really still highly manual because the nature of the documentation changes from day to day. There's many areas in AP and AR that require individual follow-up, right? And customers and vendors and parsing and extracting insights from unstructured documents like invoices and contracts and tax forms. So I think you really need that next level of technology. And Nick, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, as this intelligent automation has had these significant evolution, I think there's really a need for greater inherent understanding of where the data is located in a document. You mentioned that OCR is great, because it looks for things to be located in the same place. It generally depends on templates or rules that define a document layout. Like a check is always going to have the signature down here, the date up there, the check number over here, the dollar amount over there. That's great because it's structured. But what's cool about computer vision is it really takes that document and image conversion really to the next level with capabilities that would provide superior performance, really surpassing what a human being or the human eye can accurately detect. You mentioned edge detection, feature matching, image segmentation, and so on. But how does that break down to what we're talking about here? Well, these machine learning algorithms detect incoming messages. For example, an invoice. The difference between a check and an invoice is a check, everything's located in the same place. In an invoice, there are a million types of invoices. The stuff is located in different places. Some have the address on top, some have the address on the bottom. Some have, the invoice is itemized, some it's not. And so this is where machine learning algorithms and computer vision bring in that sentiment and intent analysis, bring in and try to make sense of what this document is, and then either surface it to a human operator for processing, or actually process it itself, handing it over to a workflow for posting in a cash application management system or so on. So computer vision really simplifies the paper-driven processes across the whole enterprise. I mean, I'm talking inbox inquiries, things that come in your email, vendor onboarding. How can you take a W-9 tax form and glean the information off that tax form and write it into your ERP system, and so on. So there's a lot that we can really do. So computer vision and the next generation of this technology is really allowing us to do some things that we've never been able to do before. So let's jump to the next phase. Did you want to add anything to that before I jump into RPA and SmartBots, Elaine?
No, I just think, yeah, and it can be unstructured. And I think that's the biggest difference, is that it could be an email, it could be an attachment, but the artificial intelligence, the machine learning algorithms, it can really understand the intent and the sort of the financial context with which information is extracted. So it takes it to that next level. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit now. Maybe Nick, you can kick us off in terms of, let's talk a little bit about RPA and SmartBots technology, and what are the differences between these two technologies?
Cool. So I'll break it down like this. RPA is essentially a set of steps. It's not a form of AI. It's software that's programmed via code. Like somebody wrote lines of code to accomplish basic human tasks and mimic a human being doing a task. It executes like a human, but it has to be trained for every new task. It's also very brittle. If it's using the user interface of you log into your bank and the bank moves the login button by 1 pixel, it could break. So it's meant to try to mimic what a human being does. Artificial intelligence, on the other hand, AI-enabled bots are programmed to really think like humans. And I'm using the word think, although it's a machine. It simulates the cognitive abilities of a human being, and it uses that to mimic the actions of a human, as well as to provide insights on what should be done. And it could really be applied to any function that the human mind is capable of. So learning and problem solving. AI parses data. It tracks and evaluates what to do with documents. and it applies what it learned to make better, more informed decisions. So it's using what's called heuristics to continue to learn and get better and better over time. So this includes functions like autofill and autocorrect. If you've ever used Gmail and your Gmail like completes your sentence and figures out what you want to say, that's actually using artificial intelligence to try to figure out what your intent is. And again, because it's connected to the internet and uses the network effect, it's using the acquired knowledge of millions or billions of people and millions and billions of emails to try to figure out what that is. It mimics the human thought process based on these patterns. It takes data from structured or semi-structured, even unstructured data. It functions without regular human intervention. And so, it's really, the way I would describe it in shorthand, and I'll turn it back over to you in a moment here, Elaine, is really RPA is meant to replace what a human does. AI-enhanced smart bots don't replace what a human does, but it really augments the human being, and it's not trying to replace Bob the bookkeeper or Amy the accountant. Rather, AI-enhanced smart bots are giving Bob superpowers or giving Amy the ability to see far into the future and provide recommendations. So that's kind of my take on RPA versus smart bots. What's your take, Elaine?
Yeah, let's jump to the next one and talk about a little bit more other applications in that area in terms of, you can get into the very specifics to say RPA does a certain task and it can do that task well, so long as that task is something that's repeatable and that task is something that doesn't change. Because if it changes, then that's when RPA sort of breaks down. So we think about something like issue handling, right? So RPA, unfortunately, it leaves a backlog. If it runs into a problem, it just has that problem. It sits there until a developer can come in and fix it and either recode it or kind of tweak it and figure out where the RPA sort of lost the track and kind of went off. When it comes to data capture, again, RPA, it captures predefined data sets. So if your data set changes, then that RPA is not going to function properly. When it comes to problem resolution, RPA is going to give up and quit. If it doesn't understand something, it's unable to make a decision. It can't do a binary yes. It can only do binary yes and no. And then if it's a no, it just stops working. When it comes to interactions, it can't dynamically interact. It's a very static, one-way kind of just sort of executes its tasks. But when it comes to speed, well, RPA still is very valuable because it does things about 70% faster than humans. Now, if you take this to the next gen technology and you employ things like an AI-enabled smart bot, for example, now issue handling, these bots become smarter at that task. You talked about this earlier, Nick, that it learns over time. And then what it can do if it runs into a problem, well, then it escalates that issue for human intervention. It doesn't just leave that problem unfixed and unattended to. When it comes to data capture, then your smart bots, they emulate human vision, right? So we talked a lot about that with the computer vision as well. And it's able to switch between types of information, whether it can handle the structured and it can also handle the unstructured information. And then when it comes to problem resolution, again, it's asked humans to help to solve the problems. And when it comes to interactions, well, these AI-enabled kind of smart bots, they're real time, they're working real time, and they ask for help when it doesn't understand something. And they also have this ability to have an interchange. And I think, Nick, you alluded to this too, that they can actually understand the context. They can understand financial terms, for example. So when it comes to communication, it can be a multi-directional, sort of more conversational nature in which it responds, and then a response comes back and it can respond again. So it's in that way, it is much more advanced than just a simple RPA. And when it comes to speed, well, these kind of smart bots can actually work 400 times faster than people on average. Not to mention they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, don't get sick, don't get tired. Yeah, they just keep learning. So it's pretty cool.
This is all really cool. I understand RPA versus smart bots, but let's bring it down to the finance. Why should a finance person care about this, Elaine?
Yeah, 100%. So what are the advantages? So, okay, we've got rudimentary basic tech like RPA, which is still great technology. And then you have these AI-enabled smart bots. Well, what can they do to replace some manual finance functions? So when you think of these specific use cases, and we kind of put these together for these technologies, again, you're going to know that the RPA is going to be good for these structured data entry, for processes that don't alter or change, that are exactly the same over and over. something like sending a templated dunning notice. And that more advanced tech, such as these AI enhanced smart bots, that's going to be functions that, you know, that the capability is going to really be expanded. So think of these repetitious processes that are manual, but may have some variation that an AI-enabled software could handle. So things like email monitoring, for example, or maybe organizing your inbox, or invoice data extraction, tax form capture, correction, and what I talked about, this omnidirectional correspondence. And Nick, maybe take us into some of these few classic examples that we have on our lovely chart today.
Why don't I work through the first three, and then I'll hand it over to you for the next three. So I kind of think of these in a couple of different ways. So, you know, you have manual process, you have what's handled by robotic process automation, and then you have what's handled by AI enhanced smart bots. So with customer classification and outreach, specifically in the collections function, a manual process would be, hey, let's reach out to the customers based on their personal preference or some sort of static criteria. East Coast people in the morning, West Coast people in the afternoon. With RPA, you can automatically segment customers based on some predefined lists that are more or less hard-coded. But with smart bots, you can dynamically classify customers and respond to customers based on their behavior. If somebody seems like they're angry, or they have a dispute, or they've replied back, the AI-enhanced smart bots can then interpret that and either respond back to the person or surface it to a human operator. When we look at work lists, again, a collections function, manual processes, so they prioritize a work list with no standardization or collection strategy. It's whatever the collector feels like doing. With RPA, you can then prioritize based for all the collectors in your organization based on a predefined business rule. Again, hard-coded. But with smart bots, auto-generate dynamically prioritized work lists with suggested actions that are customized according to individual accounts. If you think about Amazon, you know, I order from Amazon all the time. It's constantly telling me things that it thinks I should buy based on my previous buying behavior or the buying behavior of, you know, a middle-aged guy. So that same type of AI technology that's used on Amazon shopping can also be used in your back office to show how you can proactively reach out to your customers. And then finally, with the dunning process, a manual dunning process, you know, decide the mode, decide the tone. Is this person, you know, a key account or not? We'll have to leave that up to a person. Well, with RPA, you can send the correspondence according to predefined rules and criteria, again, hard-coded. But with smart bots, you can automatically send this correspondence based on the classifications of the person. Are they a key account? Are they a fast payer? Are they a slow payer? Are they behind on their payments? Are they still in good standing and they're paying in advance, but maybe they're not paying as far in advance as they used to? So the AI-enhanced smart bots can then reclassify those in your dunning process and do things that even human beings have a hard time doing. Elaine, you want to talk about CRM and so on?
Yes, so customer relationship management, when you think of that as the manual process, right? That's when you talk to someone and you either put it on a sticky note or you put notes in some Word doc somewhere. You know, if you've had a commitment to pay, all that stuff can be stored, and it might be all over the place. With RPA, you can sort of take that information and sort of structure it, if it's data that comes in on a regular basis, and put it in a central place. Then again, you use a more advanced technology like a smart bot. Now you can capture whether it's structured and unstructured data, and it's able to populate that in some kind of central place so that you don't have these notes all over. Now, when it comes to like something like data capture, that's another big area. You know, we hear all the time about how data entry is like the bane of the AR and the AP clerk's existence, right? Well, when you have to manually input it, not only is that tedious kind of work, but it's also can be error prone. You know, operators can get tired, they can become not pay as much attention, you'll get more errors. RPA can help solve some of that. If that data capture is consistent and it's set up in a format, and again, like Nick said, hard-coded, it's able to take that information if that information always comes in the same way. But with a smart bot, now it's able to capture that information, collect it all together, and put it into the system, whether it is in a structured format or in an unstructured format. And I think when it comes to communication, that's another area where it is a big difference. If you had to sit on your collections team and you had to send out emails to all of your customers, it will take you days to put together the right email for the right customer, to research, okay, where are you in the account? What's the status of the account? Who should you reach out to? What should you write? How do you personalize that note for them? Well, if you put a little bit of RPA in place, now you can able to get those customers, they can be segmented, and certain sets of customers can reach and get certain sets of templated dunning notices, and that can help you quite a bit. But then take it to that next level. These smart bots are actually able to send emails based on behavior. And I think even getting to the point where it can, these smart bots can understand natural language and interpret the meaning and context of emails that might come in and the emails that are going out. And it can respond conversationally to inquiries and updates that come in from your customers, capture things like a commitment to pay on a certain date. And the AI technology can read that email and actually capture that date and populate it in your system. So it goes beyond just a form that goes out or a template that goes out. So I think, having talked a little bit about RPA, let's go and let's take a break from all the tech jargon for a minute, and let's have another poll question. Now we're going to see if you're paying attention or if we've just been talking and we put you all to sleep. I hope not. But as we talk here today, we'd like to know what your opinion is. What do you think the key benefits of automation in the finance back office would be? So if you could just select one of the ones that we see up on the screen, there's 5 choices you have. Do you think the key benefit of automation in the finance back office would be reduce the time spent on manual tasks? Do you think it would be to minimize errors in your financial data? Would one of the key benefits of automation be increasing the team's speed and productivity? Would it be decreasing operational risk? And then lastly, do you think the key benefit of automation in the finance back office would be the ability to enhance the predictability of your business outcomes? So where do you see the greatest advantage? Nick, any thoughts on where you think our audience is going to give the biggest poll response?
Well, I think my guess is going to be the first one. Reduce time spent on manual tasks is my guess. And as you and I talked about earlier, I think decreased operational risk is probably going to come in last, if I had to guess. So those are my 2 guesses. The first one is the lead, and then the fourth one is probably the last.
I think we'll also maybe see increased team speed and productivity might be popular, because I think when people think about technology and these kind of manual clerical type tasks, and being able to speed that up and that process there, I think that's, when it comes to productivity, that's an important one as well. So
for sure.
Yeah, I think a few more seconds here, then we'll close out the polls. We thank you for voting and giving us your insight. We'd love to hear what's going on with all of the attendees in the audiences that we speak with and speak to. So it's really great. Okay, there you go. And now the poll. Well, look at that. We were both right. 33% reduced time spent on manual tasks, and 33% said increase the team's speed and productivity. And interestingly enough, the predictability came in last. So there were a couple people voted to decrease operational risk. And I think, as you know, working in the finance back office, risk is always on our minds, always on our minds. So kind of an interesting set of results. I like it.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Cool. Should we go back to the presentation?
Yeah, let's get back to the.
So can you see my screen, Elaine?
Yes, I'm able to see your screen.
Good. I'm learning here. You know, I'm not artificial intelligence, but I'm, you know, just human intelligence, trying to get better at WebEx every day, or GoToMeeting, sorry. Okay, so let's talk about natural language processing. This is actually an area in which I've spent a good amount of my career. So natural language processing, or NLP, is really the manipulation of natural language, and the ability to read and understand it, both in a speech format and in text format. So if you've ever called your bank, call center is an area I spend a lot of time in, and you know, your bank might say, you know, hey, thanks for calling XYZ Bank. Please, in a few words, tell me why you're calling. And you could say things like checking account, savings account, you know, pay off my mortgage, whatever. You've experienced natural language processing. It's just simply understanding what somebody says and then mapping that to what's called a grammar and trying to figure out what that person meant and then taking an action. In the case of call centers, it's routing it to the right place. So it's been around for 50 plus years. It grew out of linguistics, you know, out here in Stanford. You know, there's a large, you know, practice around natural language processing and understanding. And so, but really the huge improvements to this technology have come really in the increase in computational power. So it's the power of your phone to understand what you're saying, the power of your computer, and also again the network effect. The more people are using this, the better it gets at understanding things like accents and other things. I'll tell you a little secret. Your banks customer service application is actually tuned for a banking grammar. So it understands the language of checks and accounts and paying off mortgages and getting a new debit card. If you call your airline, for example, and you use any of those phrases in an airline, they won't understand anything, because that grammar is tuned to things like arrivals, departures, gates, baggage, ordering on Amazon, or ordering, checking the status of an order by calling in. That grammar is tuned to the context of that. So what we're talking about there is really, trying to achieve these meaningful results in areas like healthcare, media, finance, human resources, and others. So, organizations really determine what customers are saying about a service or product. I'll give you another example: social media. So I gave you examples of voice-based natural language processing, but companies also use NLP to try to figure out what their company is, what people are saying about their company online, on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever, and try to understand the sentiment, if people are angry or they're happy on social media. This uses what's called sentiment analysis to provide information about customer choices and those drivers. So the last thing I'll say is that really companies like Google and others are classifying your emails and reading those things using NLP because they are processing billions of transactions every day. Billions of emails are coming in every day. And the ability for Google's algorithm to see what's being said, make sense of it, makes their algorithm smarter and smarter. So natural language processing is actually used hand in hand with artificial intelligence to gain a better understanding of what's being said. So Elaine, you want to tell us a little bit more about how this stuff works?
Yes, but I'll say there's probably one word that is across every one of those natural language processing, that you talked about, Nick. Representative.
Yes.
Yeah. When you get to that point, you're like, representative.
Exactly.
Well, I'll just go into a little bit of detail on what are some of the techniques that natural language processing uses. There's something called a bag of words, and it's kind of funny. I think some of these phrases are hysterical, but it's a commonly used model that allows all the words to be counted in a piece of text. So it creates an occurrence metrics for a sentence or for a document, and it disregards grammar, and it doesn't look at the order of words at all, but it looks for word frequencies and the occurrences as they're used in order to train as a classifier. Then there's tokenization. So not quite the same as when we talk about, with your credit cards, but tokenization, it's the process of segmenting running text into sentences and words. So in essence, it's the task of cutting text into pieces, what we call tokens, and at the same time throwing away certain characters such as punctuation and taking them out of the equation. Then there's the stop words removal. This one is actually kind of fun because what it does is it gets rid of common language articles, pronouns, prepositions. So think of things like and, the, to, in. And when it uses this process, it takes these very common words that appear and they really don't provide a lot of contextual value for the NLP objective. So they're filtered out, they're excluded from the text and the way they're processed. And so therefore, it does a widespread removal of them and these frequent terms that are not going to be informative from the corresponding text around it. Then there's something called stemming. That refers to the process of slicing the end or the beginning of words with the intention of removing these affixes, right? So these lexicon additions that you might see to the root of the word. So they want to get to the root of the word. What is the main word that they're talking about? So taking off things like ing, un, or things like that are at the beginning or the end of the word. And then here's another one. I love this one. Lemmatization. This has the objective of reducing a word to its base form. So similar to what we talked about with the stemming. And then it groups together different forms of that same word. So for example, you think about verbs in the past tense, they're now changed to the present tense. So it changes went to go because it's still that same form of the verb, or it might change synonyms all to be the same. So everywhere it finds a different synonym, it might change them all to from like best or brightest or what it might be, just change them all to good, for example. And then it standardizes these words and the similarity in the meaning of their roots, right? And although it seems like it's very closely related to stemming, it's a little bit different because it's a different approach to how to get to the root form of these words. And then the last technique that NLP uses is this called topic modeling. And this is a method for uncovering hidden structures in these sets of texts or in documents. So it clusters text to discover latent topics based on their contents, and it processes individual words and assigns them value based on the distribution of them within that document or within that set of texts. Okay, so having said that, let's bring it back around to the back office. What does NLP mean for finance and finance functions? So I think you can see a lot of advanced tech is going to be integrated with this natural language processing, that's the NLP, and natural language understanding, that's the NLU, and these semantic libraries that we referred to, this huge context, these huge volumes of data that it also uses to train and learn. And that's going to really allow these non-technical finance business users to really leverage artificial intelligence, because these smart bots can perform a huge range of tasks, and they can communicate internally and externally to stakeholders using natural language in finance terms that others understand. And these intelligent bots can now translate requests into actionable sequence processes that they can execute on behalf of the business user. And Nick, you got some thoughts on NLP?
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, I can't help but think that this is really kind of another enabling technology that really allows you to, once you grab those words that somebody's either typing in and sending in an email, or saying out loud, or you're seeing someplace in a document, you can then kick off some other things like a workflow. And you know, using NLP, it actually makes your AI technology even better. Because it's got that contextual understanding that you were talking about, and it can respond in language that's really related to finance. Earlier, I was talking about the grammar and how a grammar in a certain application might be tuned to banking or airlines or ordering something online. In this case, for the finance back office, the grammar is then tuned to understand the finance-related intent in documents. Words like invoice, purchase order, and to your point about, I forget what the phrases that you used about the synonyms, that PO and purchase order mean the same thing, and PR or purchase requisition are equivalent to each other. That the word accrual has a meaning. Which one was it?
Lemonization.
Lemonization. Right, I love that. I learned something new today. So it's that these applications in the back office are now tuned to speak the language of finance and understand what somebody is saying in the same way that those other applications do. And then furthermore, I think, as you've pointed out here, it can use sentiment analysis to detect disputes in an email, anger, frustration, and of course then you can alert that to a human being to intervene in that case, because nobody wants to dispute you know, a bill or an invoice with the computer. They want to talk to a human being, so let's put a human being. Human beings are good at. So interesting stuff.
Representative.
Representative. Again, back to that.
Yeah. So let's bring it all together, Nick. Let's talk about what are the benefits, if you really want to look to advanced tech, how can that make a huge impact for finance back office and what it can do?
Well, you know, I was talking to a guy last week who was up in Canada, and I asked him a question. He's a CFO at a company, and I asked him about hiring. You know, how hard is it to attract and retain talent up in Eastern Canada, kind of like Atlantic Canada? He said, "Man, it is really hard. These millennials they're tech savvy. They've grown up with the internet. They've grown up with smartphones. They don't know a world in which you don't have all this stuff. And then furthermore, they have a really low tolerance in repetitive manual work. You know, they don't want to do the stuff that, you know, entry-level accountants used to have to do: data entry, reconciling column A to column B. What they want to do is they want to be analysts. They have more interest in advanced analytics and reporting, and being able to drive the business forward. So, you know, the way I see this is that really the language of business is going to evolve around beyond accounting, and it's more than reconciling your basic debits and credits and things like that, but really allowing these finance professionals to focus on these key strategic drivers and decisions. Thoughts on that, Elaine?
Yeah, you know, there was a study that was done by Forbes and KPMG, right? And it found that with advanced technologies, companies were seeing a wide range of benefits, and a lot of them we have listed here, you know, but the biggest benefit was increased visibility into end-to-end processes and controls. And that was about 30% of the respondents talked about that. And I think this allows people who are willing to embrace technology and advanced technology, they're better able to identify like data outliers and anomalies. They can gain real-time insights into areas of heightened risk, or they can even control some of the weaknesses or the gaps they have with their functions. And they can do things like quarterly and year-end reporting much faster. Imagine that, if you could close the books that much quicker. Oh man, what a relief that would be, right? And I think that these advanced technologies can really take you to the next level. When we kind of like summarize it up, financial executives are looking for opportunities to drive more efficiency and to have these effective business models and these optimal professional experiences for their people, right? And I think advanced technologies really can provide an opportunity to realize this kind of success. And it's going to allow teams to spend more time, and whether they're millennials, whether they're workers that you retrain and you get them up to speed with technology, they're going to then start spending more time doing things like advanced analytics and things that are more strategic and impactful for the organization. So let's go to our last poll question. Yeah, thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, let's go to our last poll question. We've got about 9 minutes left. I'll let you kind of, as we go through this poll question, we'll figure out, if we want to, what else we want to present to the group here today. And then I'm not sure if Patty's got some QA from the audience, but we certainly want to leave time for people to ask questions.
Sure. So I'm just going to talk about what should be automated while we have this poll question up. And I think, this new era that I talked about, harkening back to the very beginning of our presentation, the Industrial Revolution, and the fifth one that's coming around between the AI systems, cognitive systems. I think AI-driven workflows and decision that's supported it across these massive volumes of data, that's really going to be the hallmark of areas that should be automated. Okay, so it's augmenting people and human operators with intelligent automation to deliver insights that are consumable in multiple form factors. And that's going to allow the business to be more responsive to customer needs at all times. So the human piece of that, the relationship building, that's where your teams can concentrate. So I think I'll break it down into 4 main areas that should be automated. 1, look for repetitive processes. So the greater a process is repeated, the more likely that process should be AI powered. So if it's one-off and custom processes, you can still, if they've got minimal repetition and they're really kind of lower candidates for something like AI automation. Look for things that have large volumes of data and large volume processing. So when you have a volume of transactions or interactions that exceed the capacity of your team and they're swamped, that's the kind of process that would ideally be AI powered. Think about something that might be time sensitive. So when you look at time sensitive processes, a high time to market that requires that kind of thing, that if you've got to get it to market very quickly, that's going to be something that you could power by the AI approaches. And if it takes lower time for completion, that might just still remain on the human side of things. And I think the last one that I would talk about is complex processes. So good candidates for AI-powered automation include complexity beyond human comprehension, while simple tasks can also be optimized using technology and advanced things like artificial intelligence or machine learning. Mm-hmm. So Nick, you want to talk about some just quick practical next steps? And then I think we could sort of jump to questions if we have some coming in from the audience.
All right, sounds good. So I think first of all, I'll just run through these in just 60 seconds or less. If you have not moved to the cloud, it's time to move to the cloud. That's one thing. One of the common themes that we've said over and over again is, in order to take advantage of these advanced technologies, you need something called the network effect, where a lot of data is going in, a lot of data is coming out. So if you've not moved your financial application to the cloud, I would strongly recommend you do. 10 years ago, when I first got into this industry, the cloud was a scary place. It's actually inverted now, where more and more CFOs do not want to have their financial data on site. They want it to be in the cloud. Look for innovative architecture. We spent a lot of time talking about these cognitive smart bots that actually have learning and understanding. So think about like the new technologies that you want to. Lift and shift versus transformation. An easy thing to do would be to just try to repeat what Bob the bookkeeper does, or use RPA to mimic what Amy the accountant is doing. I would encourage you to think about the process holistically, and instead of trying to replace Bob or Amy, to think about what you want to accomplish and how you want to change that function. Instead of just mimicking human behavior, how can you apply cognitive learning to that task? Once you've then done that, you're going to need to take Bob the bookkeeper and Amy the accountant and give them more important and meaningful things to work on. That's things like analytics, driving the business forward, providing recommendations, and then of course capitalizing on this opportunity. Because while you're doing this, you mentioned, Elaine, 400% faster. all this time back. You get all this stuff unlocked. Another benefit would be like to get more money in the door, reduce your days sales outstanding. These are all great ways to improve the health and the benefits of your business and the strength and competitiveness of your business. So really use this as an opportunity to think about how you want to drive your business forward and then capitalize on that opportunity.
And then I'll just talk real quick about, when you're looking at vendors and you're evaluating different software, don't design a new system for an old process. I think Nick alluded to this too. Take a step back, assess your as-is process, and so you can design a to-be. And then you want to make sure that the vendors you work with, they clearly articulate what your as-is process is, and they can actually set the right expectations for what your to-be processes should look like. Communication is super important. I think everyone knows that. But when you select a vendor, you need to have someone who understands your company's business, the needs that you have, and also the constraints that you have. And you have to have an open dialogue and the proper evaluation. So make sure that you have a true collaboration, a true partnership between you and whatever vendor you employ, that there's flexibility and understanding for what you're trying to accomplish and how this technology can get you there. I also think you need to look at things like ease of integration. Make sure your solution provider has software that easily integrates with your systems of record and has some kind of out-of-the-box configuration and functionality, because that's going to make your implementation process quick and smooth. And then you need domain expertise. There's a lot of these approaches that one size fits all, but it doesn't. You really need to have a vendor that's going to have some domain knowledge and industry experience in your space, and especially when it comes to the finance back office, to understand finance and finance-related contextual, how these things and processes are functioning and how they work in the operational back office. And then for the price right, determine if their approach is and their pricing fits your budget and it has the ability to scale. And then, of course, ROI. Everyone loves to talk about the return on investment. So the solution should deliver impact so you can get the biggest bang for your buck. So I think key takeaways, we can put this as a summarization up here real quick. A lot of the challenges like the repetitive work, manual tasks, it can really be resolved by implementing automation. So you can, this clerical administrative work could be automated. You can really allow for dynamic data collection, extraction, and transformation. And you can really get an enriched environment with greater visibility and collaboration among your teams and for all your back office functions.
Yeah, really the corporate finance back office, the future is automation, better decision-making, improved interactions, and then of course, greater visibility, as you mentioned before, and increased savings of time and money.
Yeah, and I think there's key benefits like transparency, this efficiency, the accuracy that's going to be delivered through automation, and that's going to help you recover thousands of hours annually in your back office.
Well, I hope that people understood what we talked about today with, transforming finance using these latest innovative technologies like cloud operations, machine learning, natural language processing, and computer vision to help you improve your cash performance, drive greater margins, and achieve really the biggest business impact, reducing fraud and risk, accelerating your decision-making with more precise insights to make smarter, faster, better decisions.
Right, and I think that as we wrap up here, we talked a little bit about just get started with some practical next steps. It's not so scary. You can take this on. Automation can really help you and your teams. You can start small, you can start phased, you can go with a big bang approach, but whatever you do, I would suggest you get out there and get something done. And don't forget, a good vendor evaluation and a thorough change management plan is going to help you really prepare to have the most successful implementation. I think the pace of business is really going to demand these faster and therefore shorter cycle times. And that's going to require finance to operate with this sense of greater ability, greater agility, the ability to be more nimble. We've seen a lot of this impacted by things like COVID as well. And because of this, the pace and the amount of data and the processes, there's going to have to be some standardization and simplification. And you're going to have to create more time for your teams to focus on analysis and strategy. And I think underpinning all of this, it really requires that the workforce is shifting and embracing new ways of working that's going to bring greater efficiency with technology at the forefront.
Well, sounds great.
Yeah, I think we're up at the top of the hour, though, I would say. I don't know that we have time for questions. Patty, what do you think?
Patty, yeah.
I think that we are out of time. Unfortunately, I know that people are starting to leave, but what I can do is I am going to send out a link to the on-demand video of this session once that file is available, and I will include in there contact information for Elaine and for Nick, so you can reach them directly with your questions, and I will share your questions with them as well. So on behalf of RVCF and Auditoria.AI, we do want to thank you for attending today's webinar. If you have any future questions, please reach out to Elaine and Nick. And again, I will send you out that contact information directly, but we have elaine.nowak@auditoria.ai and nick.ezzo, E-Z-Z-O, at auditoria.ai. So thank you very much for your time today. And thank you all for attending.
Thanks all.
Bye
Thank
all.
you.